In this video, I am going to do a review of the grammar tips from this newsletter. There's two important questions. How do I make my TOEFL IBT writing and speaking shine? And what are different types of sentence structures I can use during TOEFL IBT speaking and writing? These are two important questions to help you. If you can understand the answers to these questions, definitely you can get a much higher score on your TOEFL IBT. Question 1. How do I make my TOEFL IBT writing and speaking shine? Too many of the same sounding sentences become monotonous and are likely to bore your readers. Of course, if you do not vary your sentence style on the writing and speaking sections of the TOEFL IBT, you will receive a less than satisfactory score. To understand sentence variety requires that you understand 4 types of sentence structures and reasons for their respective uses. So the first question leads into my second question, which are what are different types of sentence structures I can use during TOEFL IBT speaking and writing. First, we have the simple sentence. A simple sentence consists of one subject and one verb. For example, in this sentence, you have the Lakers are winning many basketball games this year. The next type of sentence is called the compound sentence. A compound sentence consists of an independent clause. Notice in this independent clause you have the Lakers, and then you have are winning, and then you have your connectors called a coordinating conjunction, and you have the second independent clause. In this case, you have 2 different independent clauses being joined by a coordinating conjunction. That's the second type of sentence type. The third type of sentence type is called the complex sentence. In this case, you'll have a dependent clause, for example, because they're well coached, and then you'll have an independent clause, the Lakers are winning many basketball games. That's the third type. Now, why do we use them? The first type, the simple sentence, is used for emphasis. If you use this, you're actually emphasizing the important points of something. You can control how fast or slow your readers will read your writing depending on what types of sentence styles you use. For example, when you use a lot of shorter, simple sentences, the readers will slow down. The compound sentence, the reason for using this one is you have 2 ideas which are not important enough to stand alone, so you combine them into one sentence. In this case, though, both ideas are considered main ideas. The third idea, you have unequal ideas. You have one idea, maybe in this case, because they're well coached, which is what we consider a support idea, and the main idea is the Lakers are winning many basketball games. So if you have a support idea and a main idea, the complex sentence is going to work pretty well. Generally, readers actually read very fast when they're reading the complex type sentence. Okay, the fourth one is the most advanced, and I'm not going to say that you have to use it in your writing or your speaking at this point, but when you get into university, start taking classes and you begin writing research papers, I think this probably would be an appropriate sentence style. So this one is called the compound complex. You have a compound, 2 different compound sentences being joined together. For example, here you have this whole idea, then you have and, then you have the next idea here. Notice you have the independent clause, the Lakers are winning many basketball games, and then you also have another independent clause, they have a good chance of making the playoffs. Now that's the reason it's a compound sentence. The reason this is a complex sentence is because of this first dependent clause, because they're well coached. So this is pretty complicated, and readers, when you write this way, they will read extremely fast. So the complex and compound complex sentence styles is when you want your audience or your readers to read very quickly. To further understand sentence variety requires that you understand subject-verb inversions, for example, prepositional phrases of location, adverbs of negation and time, and adverb clauses when if has been omitted. So this is another thing we need to take a look at. It's also important to understand how to use fronted, present, and past participle phrases. Notice the first one. Next to my desk is my diary. The subject is actually my diary, and the verb is, and then you have next to my desk. Notice you could read this backwards. Isn't this crazy? My diary is next to my desk. Now, if you put next to my desk first, you're trying to emphasize, I think, the location of where it is. So you would do that for emphasis. The second one, adverbs of negation and frequency. Notice this, never, and then you have your auxiliary verb, you have the main subject, and then you have the main verb here. Never have I tasted such delicious meat. Now you could also say, if you wanted, well, let me just say it instead of typing it. You could say, I have never tasted such delicious meat. However, that's not nearly as strong of a statement as never have I tasted such delicious meat. That's extremely strong a statement. Okay, let's talk about conditional clauses. This is difficult. You'll see this grammar if you take the paper-based TOEFL for sure. And I think it's good that you use it in your writing and in your speaking, because it shows your TOEFL human raters on the speaking and writing sections that you're able to use advanced grammar structures. Notice, were I at home, I would be watching TV. You could have said, if I were at home, I would be watching TV, but that's not advanced as saying, were I at home. That's one way to do it. How about this? I would be watching TV were I at home, and of course you could also say, I would be watching TV if I were at home. Notice here, you have were, then you actually have your subject there, and the if is actually implied in that sentence. Alright, let's take a look at two paragraphs. Paragraph A, without sentence variety. Let's read it together. Having a clean slate is an important characteristic to me. I don't want to get caught up in problems resulting from the illegal activities of someone else. I may not have committed any crimes, however, I could still be involved. I live with that person. Those are extra problems I could do without. Some of those activities can also be contagious. Therefore, I might start participating in it. I'm around it, for example. Living with the person forces me to be around it, whereas if I were just hanging around, I could just leave and go elsewhere. Now let's break this down into the different sentences. The first one, having a clean slate is an important characteristic to me. That's a simple sentence. Why? Because it has a subject. Having a clean slate is a gerund phrase, and the verb is. That's a simple sentence. The next one. I don't want to get caught up in problems resulting from the illegal activities of someone else. Your subject here is I. The verb is do want, and not is a adverb. So this is also a simple sentence. Number 3. I may not have committed any crimes. Again, this is a simple sentence. May, and then not have committed. There you go. That's sentence 3. 4. However, I could still be involved. Again, it's a simple sentence. I, and then could be involved. Right there. 5. I live with that person. I and live. This is your subject and your verb right there. Okay, let's keep going. Let's take a look at the next set. 6. Those are extra problems I could do without. Now in this case, this is not a simple. It kind of means when I say those are problems that I could do without, kind of implies that in there. So in this case, you have an adjective clause, so this is a complex sentence. Number 7, some of those activities can also be contagious. You have some, and then you have can, and then be. So that's a simple sentence. 8, I might start, I, and then I might start is your subject and your verb. 9, I am. That's a simple sentence. 10, living with that person forces me to be around it again. You have a gerund phrase there. As your subject, your verb is forces. So again, that's a simple sentence. 11 is a complex sentence. You can probably guess. Is you have whereas if I were just hanging around, I could just leave and go elsewhere. So that's a complex sentence. Now the problem is the writer is using mostly simple sentence styles, which is actually not very effective. That's actually not the way you want to do your writing. You want to have a combination of the different kinds of sentence types. Alright, let's take a look at paragraph B, which does use sentence variety. Notice the difference. Having a clean slate is an important characteristic to me because I don't want to get caught up in problems resulting from the illegal activities of someone else. Even though I may not have committed any crimes, I could still be involved because I live with that person. Those are extra problems I could do without. Some of those activities can also be contagious, where I might start participating in it merely because I'm around it. Living with the person forces me to be around it, whereas if I were just hanging around, I could just leave and I could go elsewhere. Okay, let's separate the different sentences from the paragraph and notice that these sentences are actually much longer than the ones that you saw before. Having a clean slate is an important characteristic to me because I don't want to get caught up in problems resulting from the illegal activities of someone else. In this case, you have your independent clause is this, having clean slate, blah, blah, blah. Then your complex sentence is everything after because. So that's a complex sentence. Okay, the next sentence is also a complex sentence, especially because of even though I may not have committed any crimes, that's a dependent clause, and I could still be involved is your independent clause, another dependent clause because I live with that person. So this writer, instead of using 3 different sentences here, the writer has used only one. 3 is also complex. Those are extra problems I could do without. 4, you have some of those activities that can also be contagious. That's your independent clause. Then the dependent clause is where I might start participating in it and merely. And then you have another dependent clause here because I'm still around it. So that's a complex sentence. 5, living with the person forces me to be around it. That's a simple sentence. That's a short sentence. As long as you're not overdoing the shorter sentence you're writing, it's going to be okay. Use it every now and then, but not all the time. 6, whereas if I were just hanging around, I could just leave and I could go elsewhere. Wow, check it out. In this case, you have an independent clause, I could just leave. You have I could go elsewhere is another independent clause, and this makes it a compound sentence because of and. It joins the 2 independent clauses, but because of this, whereas if I were just hanging around, I think this makes it a compound complex structure. The more complicated one. Notice it's actually not that long, but it's still a fairly complicated sentence. So what does it mean? What do you get out of this? I think you have to be aware that as you regularly speak and write English, you need to make sure that you're not just using the shorter, simple sentence style. Now, on the other hand, as you're using the compound and the complex style, make sure that you have good control of those grammar structures so you're not making too many errors in your speaking and your writing. By following some of these simple steps, I think in your speaking and in your writing, you can improve and get a much higher score on the TOEFL IBT exam.